In my first interview with Tony Hughes, CEO of Huthwaite International, we covered a wide range of training subjects. But as selling is my passion, I wanted to probe him further on how Huthwaite helps create the many sales winners it does consistently every year around the globe. I asked him if I could meet again on a deeper dive into sales training effectiveness. Hello again, Tony.
Hello, Malcolm.
Great. A quick introduction first, please. A reminder of what Huthwaite International does and how it does it.
Okay. Well, Huthwaite's 44 years old now. It started as a research organisation looking at why people are better at doing their jobs on one day than they are on another day. So what is it that makes them successful, particularly in the way that they speak to people? And that's been now used through communication, through negotiation, and of course, obviously through sales. So we have a vast amount of research in what people do differently when they are successful in those three areas.
Excellent. Now, today we're taking a deeper dive into sales training effectiveness. I know and genuinely know that you don't just create salespeople, but you create sales winners. Your training is very effective. How do you achieve that?
Well, the first thing is really to make sure that the right people are getting the right skills. And how do you know they are the right skills? So we do quite a lot of work with each individual client to try and diagnose where their sales issues are and where their sales skills issues are. But basically it comes from all the research I was just talking about earlier, where we can know that the skills that we are teaching are the ones that people use when they are successful. So that's the first thing. And then the next thing is, how do you actually get them into an organization? And we spend a lot of our time on what you might call the workplace transfer part of skills development. So, most people going on a training course will probably retain 20% of it after about 5 or 6 weeks. Ours is a skills development program, which in an ideal world relies upon not just the individuals, but their peers and their hierarchy within the organization to not just to coach these days, but also to collaborate and to make sure that those skills are transferred into the workplace over a period of time.
So can anyone become an effective salesperson, or is someone born to selling?
I get this asked a lot of people, salespeople born or made, and my stock answer is, for some people it is inherent. You can make people into salespeople, but you can't make everybody into a salesperson. For some people, it's just not what they want to do. And the contrary to that, I suppose, is that although some salespeople are born, I've never met, I don't think, anybody under the age of 16, 17, 18 who said, I want to be a salesman. Right? So it's the communication skills that they have that allows them to easily move into that role. And we can see that when we train people. Normally people have been selling for a while, but we can see things that they're already good at doing the things that we know good salespeople do.
Excellent. Now, these days, of course, the purse strings are tight in companies, and those paying the training bill want to see a return on investment. How do you do that? And how do you demonstrate or evaluate it?
Okay, well, again, we get asked a lot. We often get asked for payment by results. And then we have to say to people, well, what do you mean by results? And the stock answer, of course, is, well, more sales, more revenue, more margin. When we say to people, well, that's okay, we can measure that, but to measure it properly, you've got to eliminate all of the other variables. So what the competition are doing, what's happening in the marketplace, is the market going up or down, all those kind of things. So when you start to look at that, it becomes quite difficult. You have to have a control group, you start training people, and as soon as you have a control group that you're not training, but you start training other people, the client sees that those people are instinctively doing better. So they scrap the control group and want to train everybody all at once anyway. So financial measurement is very difficult. However, what you can do, and we can do from our type of training and the fact that we are behavioral specialists, we can measure the change in people's behavior. We can compare that to whether a sales call, individual call, is successful. And if you have, once we've defined success for the client, if you have enough successful calls in a cycle of sales, in a sales cycle rather, that cycle gets shorter. But quite often the measurement is, are the sales cycles getting shorter because we're being more efficient and effective in our sales calls? And the other side of it, you'll find that because what we're teaching is people to create value with a customer, is you often find the margins get better because they are building and creating value with a customer. The negotiation becomes a lot easier, and therefore the margins become better. So there are a number of ways of doing it. The important thing is that there's an agreement between us and our clients as to what is that measure going to be.
Yeah, I love that idea about measuring the sales cycle, because obviously the faster they close, it's not just a faster sale, it's keeping the competitors out as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And quite often people feel that that's the starting point. Well, let's, going back to our early days of selling, always be closing. The more you can close, then the more chance your sales cycle is. So that doesn't actually work. You just get more objections. But actually, once that sales cycle does become shorter, then of course, as you quite rightly say, it keeps the competitor out, and it keeps the funnel moving through.
Well, when I started my sales training a long, long time ago, it was, here's a Dale Carnegie book, and look, I've still got it. Go read it. There was no system, just lots of ideas and tactics. I wish I had what I now have, and you can see my dog-eared book of spin system all those years ago. So let's deep dive into it. How does spin work?
Right, well, first, sounds a strange thing to do, but first of all, let's forget the word spin, right? Because spin is an acronym, which I'll talk to you about in a few minutes. But basically, it works by being a consultative way of speaking with people. It allows the person to focus, the buyer, to focus very heavily on their reasons for change and their needs. So if you imagine a balance or a seesaw, most of us make decisions based on what's good for us and what's bad for us. What's on this side of a balance that means we ought to change compared to what's good at the moment, and then maybe what's on this side of the balance that's going to bring us great value compared to not doing it. So spin is about influencing what's on the positives, the sides of the balance that move people towards change, and then on the positives. It's not about telling them what's good for them. It's about people starting to recognize for themselves how much better their life would be if they were in a different position. That's why it's very consultative. And the SPIN bit stands for 4 questions that we recognized and isolated that people asked when they were successful. The situation questions, which are fairly obvious about the person's situation. Problem questions, which are about the problems that they may have, and implication questions about how those problems may be affecting other parts of the area of the organization. And then the N stands for need payoff questions, which are about the payoffs they would get from solving those needs. Now remember, this is questions, it's not pushing. It's not from my point of view, it's from their point of view. So it's not a complicated, whether you call it a system or a methodology, it's a way of holding a conversation. It's not a rigid sequence. It's something that takes time to learn, and obviously has to be used strategically, not just tactically. You can't just go ask this question, that question, this question, that question. It's quite a lifelong skill, really.
I keep dipping back into my book because I still think so much of it is relevant. But just tell everybody, how does spin stay relevant in these changing times?
Okay, well, if you go back to what I said earlier, if it's about the way that people make decisions, people continue to make decisions based on weighing up either side of a balance. What's different is as times move through, what's on either side of the balance may be different. But maybe if I can give you an example of that. If you went back maybe 10, 15 years, a lot of people's problems might be focused on unreliability of equipment or systems. Nowadays, things are much more reliable than they used to be. So their minds might be more focused on what the future problems are going to be, the pace of change, keeping up with competition, that kind of thing. So once the salesperson is in that area, they will be asking the right kind of questions about the right kind of problems. And that's why it remains relevant. And again, of course, they'll be talking about the different levels of value and asking questions about the value people are going to get relevant to the present day times rather than 20 years ago or 15 years ago. So it's very much down to the fact it's the relationship between the the buyer and the seller. So really, it's more about, is the seller current rather than is the methodology current? That makes sense.
Yeah, I got it. Tony, as always, a revelation to speak to you, and thanks for the interview.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Thank you.